in this session, I'm going to just cover a little bit about who we are in the National Trail Program, what it is that we do, and what are some of the top priorities that may be of interest to you, and specifically give a little bit of context about the 10-Year Trail Challenge. So I know many of you probably know this, but I have actually found that there's a lot of people that have appreciated when I provide a little bit more background. So just a reminder that the Forest Service is the only land management agency in the Department of Ag. The others are in the Department of the Interior, and that we are in this branch. There's 4 branches of the Forest Service, and we are in the National Forest System branch. And then in the Washington office, this is a busy slide with a lot of labels on it, but just to show you kind of where my program is in the world of the Washington office. So we have the chief's office at the top, of course, and then we have a deputy chief over the National Forest System, and we all report to the deputy chief. So engineering, lands, wilderness, wild and scenic rivers, rec heritage, volunteer resources, those are all programs under NFS. And I work in the Rec Heritage Volunteer Resources Program. And this is a little snapshot of our staff area. So within RHVR, the Rec Heritage Volunteer Services Program Directorate, we have the public services staff, and then there's another staff area under another assistant director. But we are all under Tracy Tophoven. She's my direct boss, and you can see here all the folks that work in our staff: winter sports, rec planning, special uses, and then in trails, these boxes in orange. So this is my program area. We have an assistant trail program manager. Our acting right now is Matt Abel. And then we also have the SAW program manager is under the trails program, Pete Duncan. And then Mackenzie Helmandaler is our trail specialist. We've actually got her on loan, thankfully, from Enterprise, and she's doing a bunch of work on the 10-Year Trail Challenge, getting that up and running and out the door. And then we're really fortunate to have a resource assistant with the trail program that's funded through a partner organization funding for her for an entire year. So she just started a few weeks ago. Oops. Don't know why it's doing that. Come on. Next slide. Okay. So this is an overview. When I talk about the trail program, this is kind of what I'm talking about in terms of trail miles. So we have just under 160,000 miles of trails in the National Forest System, and that is the most miles of trail of any of the land management agencies in the nation, potentially the world. I need to figure that out because that's a good superlative if I can say we have the most in the world. About 20% or 1/5 of our trail miles are within designated wilderness. About 40% are motorized, and so obviously outside of wilderness. So just kind of give you a sense of the trail program. And if you wrap these trail miles around the earth, it would go around the earth over 6 times. That's how many miles we have. It's kind of hard to wrap my mind around. So we have many trail teams that are supporting trails. And so we have the Washington office team, which I told you about. That's my program area specifically. And then we also have a National Trail Board, which is kind of our main advisory kind of leadership group for the trail program nationally. That consists of the regional trail program managers from each of the 9 regions, plus a rep each, and the Washington office trails team, plus 1 rep each from these other 2 teams that you see, the Trails Advisory Group. So they got set up a few years ago, kind of in a similar model to the Wilderness Advisory Group or the WAG. So the TAG, we have 1 field going rep from each region, and they will report directly to advise the chief on different issues. And they work really closely with the National Trail Board as well. And then we have the Forest Service administers 5 congressionally designated national scenic trails and 1 congressionally designated national historic trail. So that each of those trails has a trail administrator as the Forest Service lead administrator for coordinating activities over the length of the trail across different jurisdictions. So we have a team of our NSHT, National Scenic and Historic Trail administrators, and then they have a rep on the trail board as well. And then we also have our trail technical team, kind of the unsung heroes behind the scenes. They are the ones like our infra help desk person. We actually have 2 folks on 1 day a week for help desk, and they are working on the nuts and bolts behind the scenes to keep infra trails running. So we're really fortunate to have all this support in trails, and we all work, very collaboratively. So what do we do in the National Trail Program? So overall, we provide that leadership and guidance and kind of the strategic direction for the trail program. Um, you know, data is a big piece, the annual accomplishment reporting and reporting things up to Congress. And I don't talk directly to congressionals, but that's a lot of what happens in the Washington office is we'll get congressional inquiries about, you know, a certain piece of our program or how we're responding to a law that was passed a few years ago. So that's quite a bit, as well as doing that and then providing some input for the agency to do testimony on different potential bills that are out there. And then obviously partnerships are a huge piece of our program, and communication, that is a constant challenge and a constant thing that I'm working on is how do we effectively communicate from the Washington office through the levels of the regional office and the forests and the districts, and then alternatively, how do we effectively get information and hear feedback from the districts on up the chain to the Washington office? So that's constantly what in our trail teams we're trying to talk about. How do we promote that communication? And that's where our TAG, our Trails Advisory Group, has been really helpful because those are directly folks in the field. So, you know, I talked about just kind of overall what we do, and you know, these are all grounded in service. We are all here, you know, this slide really talks about how we strive to show up as the National Trail Program, and services first and foremost. You know, we are a public service agency, and then we are here to serve the field, to serve public and partners and volunteers. Again, collaboration is a big value that we incorporate into our program. Diversity in all aspects, so diversity of perspectives and ethnicities and backgrounds and ideas. That's how we get the best ideas, is by bringing different people together with different viewpoints, and that's how we get the best outcomes. And you know, what I'm really striving to do with the program is be really thoughtful and strategic and intentional about how we're investing our energy and the actions that we can take to make the most difference to support folks on the ground. So I'll give you a little overview of, you know, this is just a sprinkling of some of the things on the plate. There's a lot to do with the national program, a lot of really cool opportunities. And then there's also, you know, I'll just say in short, there are different laws that are passed that's our responsibility to make sure that we are implementing those laws. So Great American Outdoors Act, what an incredible opportunity for so much funding to get out on the ground. And that's been a very heavy lift for the trail program, is to help provide some guidance around that. And I'm also on the working group for the Washington office for that process for the NAMP, National Asset Management Program, that the GAOA funding is a part of. The National Trail Stewardship Act, that has several facets to it. You all might be familiar with the Outfitter Guide pilot program, where they can do work on trails that would offset the fee that they would normally pay for their permit activities. And there's other pieces under there as well, and like looking at fire crews and engaging in trail maintenance that way. Let's see, policy updates. So there are a couple different policy pieces in the mix. So the National Scenic and Historic Trails Group is working to update the policy for NSHTs to provide kind of more clarity around how to manage those congressionally designated areas. And then, as I'll show in the next slide, Pete Duncan is also working with the SAW program managers to amend the SAW policy to have a little bit more clarity around delegation of authority and some other pieces there. We're working to bring the National Recreation Trail Program back up to kind of where it should be. It's been a little bit kind of in the background, but that is a really unique and incredible program, and a lot of opportunity there. So we're working to increase our visibility of that program and overall management, and get some better information on the webpage about how to even get trails designated. And of course, the 10-year trail challenge, which I'll talk about in a minute. So as I mentioned, with the SAW program, working to update that policy, but there's also a couple other things just for your awareness. So Pete has been working with a national training, NTDP, National Technology Development Program, on a updated online curriculum for SAW training, which will be great, and that'll hopefully come out in the early next year. And then also a database to be tracking soil qualifications. So currently it's just tracked at the local level and maybe on a piece of paper or maybe in somebody's computer. And so we're working to put together an actual national database where everybody's soil qualifications would be in there so that we can query and see who's due to be recertified and just have a better tracking there. And then you all may be familiar with the SAW study that's going on, that the wilderness program's been working with NTDP in devising that study to look at crosscut saws versus chainsaws and the use in trail maintenance to help inform future decision making. So a couple of other things that might be of particular interest to you all is so of our national trail teams, we'll often have sub teams created to work on specific priorities and timely things. And we had a GAOA small team that developed a whole series of some tools and tips for entering GAOA project proposals. We also adjusted Infra Trails to have a composite task for deferred maintenance. So you don't have to go into each detailed task and say, okay, 10 lineal feet of a punch in and it's X dollars amount. You can just put in one composite task that would have the total deferred maintenance dollar amount. So it'll be much more efficient to enter that in. So we have field instructions for that. That's hot off the press. And all of those tools and tips are on the NAMP. If you go to the NAMP SharePoint site under guides and tools or tools and resources, you'll see a folder for trails. Okay, let's see, there's so much on this list. Temp hiring issues, so that's something that the WAG and the TAG are working on together. There's a lot of power in having a unified front on some of these cross-cutting issues. So we actually have a meeting with the business operations deputy chief on next week to put forth some recommendations for how to make temp hiring actually work better for field going folks. And so that would, well, I'm not going to get into specifics, but we can talk about that more later, but hopefully we'll see some movement on temp hiring and being able to hire people in a timely manner and fill positions in the summer as well as we need to. So Infra Trails, that's a big one in terms of helping to support the 10-year trail challenge and just everything we do is we put together a proposal for the, I'm trying not to use acronyms, but I don't know what CIO stands for, Chief Information Office. So, okay, Dusty's nodding, okay. So we put in a proposal to do a full redesign of Infra Trails and hoping that we've heard that it's a very strong proposal and just hoping that we will get approval from upper leadership to move forward with that. It's going to be a huge investment of time and resources, but it is much needed and very, very excited to make that happen sooner than later. And then we've got a whole bunch of supporting efforts we're doing on the 10-year trail challenge. So I'm going to skip this slide. I'm just going to give a very brief overview of the 10-year trail challenge, a little teaser, if you will, so that you all can go and find out some more information or reach out to me and I'm happy to talk about it. So current condition, if you think of each one of these arrows as representing either a district or a partner organization, there's some really good stuff happening on the ground. We're all going in different directions and we're often duplicating efforts because you often will have districts dealing with very similar issues and coming up with their own solutions. And so there's some inherent inefficiencies in there. There's also some gaps in skills, gaps in knowledge of what is already working for other people. And so we're kind of caught in this reactive mode as well and each coming up with our own solutions. So just in short, what we're looking for out of this 10-year trail challenge is, as I mentioned, with the trail program, we're really focused on being strategic and intentional of how do we invest our time and energy and resources to have the most impact. So what we're looking at is having this common focus of working towards sustainable trails that are supported by the community and that are, environmentally light on the land. And that we don't have to go out there 10 times a season to clear the water bars. Sustainable trail ideally wouldn't even have water bars. But so those are the things that we're working on is moving the trails towards more sustainability and working in a shared stewardship model. And filling in the gaps. So some of these supporting efforts that I'll be talking about here, or that I've already kind of mentioned in terms of improving our data systems, having toolboxes to share best practices and more knowledge, and then really focusing in on the training and the skills needed to get our workforce meaning our employees, partners, and volunteers up to be doing the highest quality work that they can. So that's what we're going for with the challenge. And just very briefly, there are 3 phases to the challenge. It's built on a collective impact model. And this first phase is just about learning and incorporating those changes as we go. And then we'll kind of ramp up the efforts as we go. So in this first phase, there's only a couple of required things. One is to establish the Trails Advisory Group, which we did. And then the other is for each forest to meet the data management standards. So publish data to management level through the enterprise data warehouse. So those, and that was already a requirement. So that's really what we're looking at for phase 1 in terms of, what the forest would need to do. Essentially what we're going to be looking at going forward is assessing trails for sustainability, assessing the workforce capacity to be maintaining those trails, and then identifying where those gaps are and systematically going after resources and ways to fill in those gaps. I'm not going to get into details here, but this slide just shows the elements that are part of the 10-year trail challenge. And the main point here is that, again, the only required one right now is that element, I can't read my slide, element E, to meet the trail data standards. That's the only one required right now for the units. And then we will be tracking these different outcomes and metrics. And then also, many of you hopefully saw the field survey that we sent out. We were working with the university this spring to develop a survey for field staff to assess baseline, kind of, what is the situation of engaging partners and volunteers? What is the situation with career development, with training opportunities? So just getting a sense of what is working and not, and where the gaps might be for field staff. And so that when we get the results in July, that'll be really informative for us as the National Trail Program to look and see, okay, where can we focus our efforts to better directly support the field in these areas? And that will help to shape the trail challenge as well. And as I mentioned, we have a lot of supporting efforts going on. I've already kind of talked about those. So in closing about the trail challenge, I know I didn't talk about the details of it, but basically this is a framework for being strategic and thoughtful about how we're investing our resources. We will be measuring this, and this will be useful and impactful. We will be assessing it every step of the way. We're not going to be doing stuff that isn't working. We're going to be doing those things that really make a difference, and that the national trail teams are here every step of the way to be supporting the field and helping to move things in the right direction. So that is the end of my presentation, and would love to hear if you all have any thoughts or questions or comments. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Great, thank you so much, Brenda. Looks like there's already one question in the chat from Pete. He asked, isn't infra trails obsolete terminology? Is it now NRM trails?
It could be. I mean, I think NRM, I think it's NRM infra trails, but yes, we could call it whichever.
Great. All right, any other questions from folks? Feel free to throw them in the chat, or you can use the reaction icon to raise your hand. I will, while we're kind of waiting for questions, want to mention that Brenda is going to be teaching the next session. It's going to be in a separate Zoom room, so you will have to log off and get on to the program to find the next link. But she'll be talking about wilderness stewardship performance, the trails element, the details about the 5 scoring components within that element with specific examples. So she'll be available there, and she'll definitely be more than willing to talk more about the Trail Stewardship Challenge and answer questions you may have there. And
you don't want to miss the WSP presentation. It's going to be a good one.
Excellent. And then also Joshua Simpson, another trail themed talk, will be discussing lessons from the field, providing up-to-date trail conditions via electronic format, sort of an overview of mapping products that deliver real-time information to the public at large. So that'll be an interesting one as well. Thank you so much, Brenda. I'm not seeing any more questions from folks. This is your last chance to ask Brenda a question.
Yeah, I see. Thank you all. or thank you to those who are writing in to thank me for the presentation. I'm happy to do that. I would really love to hear what's on your mind if you have any questions or thoughts, and you know, lay it on me. I do see Pete Irvin, can you speak to line officer engagement? So do you mean related specifically to the 10-year trail challenge, or what? I don't know if Pete, is Pete able to speak on here, or okay. Ah, Suzanne. There's my friend Suzanne.
While we're waiting here, also a reminder to complete the session survey. That'll help us out a lot.
So I guess I could just line officer engagement. I'm not sure what that is referring to. All trails competing with timber. Okay, so yes. So in terms of maybe what you're getting at is, you know, where do recreation and trails fit in the bigger priority for the agency? And certainly we've seen that, you know, fire and timber and fuels were it, and still very much are. But I will say that there is a lot of movement in the agency to really recognize the importance of recreation and trails, especially through seeing the increased use as a result of the COVID pandemic and people recreating close to home, and seeing how important trails and outdoor activities were just for their mental state and their physical health. And, you know, I think our partners are able to really capitalize on that as well with their messaging to Congress. But also we have a new administration that is much more, has much more recognition of the value of public lands and focus on diversity and equity and inclusion and connections to the outdoors. So I'm hopeful that that's going to, you know, make a difference. The 10-year trail challenge, what I like about that is that it gives us this opportunity. It gives us this leverage point, because the excuse me, the chief actually announced the launch of the 10-year trail challenge. So from the highest level of the agency, we have leadership support recognizing the 10-year trail challenge and our focus on trying to improve our trail program, recognizing the benefits that trails provide. And so I think that that is a way to be packaging up some of these things that we need to do for trails, is to help, you know, with the trail challenge. You know, it gives us more clout, basically.
Hey, Brenda, can I jump in on the line officer engagement as well?
Yeah.
I was just going to say that, you know, the National Trail Board and the Trail Advisory Group are also working on some performance measures for line officers, so that we can hopefully elevate the trails program in the minds of line, make it really kind of front and center on their performance, so that it's something they almost have to think about.
Yeah, and there are, like, Region 4 is really focusing in on recreation as a priority. And Region 2 as well is working on that. So definitely there's some regions that are starting to do that. And then as well, we're pushing for that from the national office. And I see a comment, where was it? Yeah, good luck getting all 154 national forests to go in the same direction. And of course, you know, obviously there's a lot of diversity out there, and 154 national forests, that is a lot. But the point is not that everybody is literally marching in the same direction, but that we have a common focus of what we're trying to go for, a common view of the future of working towards sustainable trails, and, you know, trying to fill in gaps in our workforce capacity so we can adequately support the work that needs to be done. And there's a whole bunch of efforts, obviously, around that.
Thank you so much, Brenda and Matt.